Well, it's great to be here, and I got the backdrop of Lake Superior behind me, and I thought we'll see how this goes. First and foremost, thank you, Scarlett, for allowing me to participate in this important workshop. And when Scarlett shared her vision for putting this program together, I thought how significant it is to recognize, appreciate, and celebrate the work our educators do for our communities. And when she asked me to join her, there was just no way I was going to back out for two significant reasons. First, I served as a public safety professional for over 36 years. I spent 31 of those years serving within the Connecticut State Police. I witnessed and experienced firsthand many human tragedies and triumphs, to include those of the Sandy Hook school shooting on December 14th of 2012. And I met Scarlett years after that tragic day and was awe-inspired by her power of forgiveness and greater message to choose love over hate. A simple but not easy concept, one I needed to pay more attention to. How she was able to transcend her family's personal tragedy into a global movement for change was more than inspiration enough for me. Her personal leadership demonstrates how I need to become a better version of myself. I'm also a lifelong learner, a student of human performance management. She asked me to discuss my doctoral research and the concepts of the hero model, and she felt it could positively impact others in the education profession. I am honored to join you, even though it is virtual. The second reason I was inspired to be here underpins who I am as a person, the very fabric of my biological DNA. Joseph F. Murray, my father. Well, Iwo Jima was the location of an iconic landmark battle during the Second World War. It is where the United States Marine Corps immortalized their reputation with the infamous flag raising on top of Mount Suribachi. And as a young Marine, my father survived that infamous battle, witnessed the flag raising, and returned home as a member of the greatest generation. With his whole life in front of him, Dad decided to become an educator and did so for 38 years. He taught fifth grade and raised a family of 10 on an elementary school teacher's salary. And like many of you, he continued his education while struggling to raise a family, earning his master's degree in 1955. It is said that the teacher will appear when the student is ready. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I fully realized the impact my father had on so many lives in his fifth grade teacher role. It is also said that if you do your job properly, your work will go to a time and a place you may never see. Well, those words couldn't have rung truer when at my father's funeral, several hundred fifth grade students, now fully grown men and women, turned out to honor the man that had impacted their lives so significantly. And in 2016, a bridge was dedicated in his name where I had the honor to commemorate the man who had positively impacted so many. He was once quoted as saying, "God saved me on Iwo to serve others." I'm not sure if he ever fully realized the impact his life had. Quite frankly speaking, I'm not sure those of you listening today realize how impactful your daily work is on shaping lives and communities. I never personally shared with him how proud I was of his work until it was too late. I won't miss that opportunity here. The purpose of this presentation is to help Scarlett in her ongoing mission and to provide you with some tools and resources to help you get that much better at the work you do. I want to provide you with examples and strategies to be more hopeful, self-assured, resilient, and optimistic. And lastly, I want to personally thank you for doing such noble and significant work. But before we go any further, I want to provide some clarifying expectations. If you are attending this presentation, I expect that you are what I consider to be higher order thinkers, that you are experienced practitioners of your craft and you practice critical thinking. The information I share and the examples I provide are simply used to illustrate the concepts I present. It is your responsibility to translate those concepts into your own application, be it personal or professional. There is no panacea, magic pill, or single theory to improve performance. When it comes to leadership and human performance management, I want you to think about putting a puzzle together. There are many pieces to a puzzle. The more pieces you put together, the clearer the picture becomes. The concepts I share today are nothing more than a few more pieces to the puzzle. It takes hard work, dedication, and commitment. I like to use the simple formula E plus T equals R, which stands for sustained effort over time will yield you results. In order to better understand what psychological capital is, I want to provide you some further context. When I use the word financial capital, what comes to mind? You might be thinking of how much money you have in the bank or stuffed in a jar at home. Others might be thinking of their real estate investments. Maybe you're thinking of precious metals like gold and silver, or others yet might be thinking stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Financial capital can be essentially categorized as what you have in terms of these different areas of your physical wealth. And when I use the word human capital, what comes to mind? Well, human capital refers to the stock of knowledge you have. It is developed throughout your lifetime and is accumulation of your experiences, self-learning, training, formal education, and other processes which lend to your bank of knowledge. Human capital can be categorized as what you know. And when I use the phrase social capital, what comes to mind? Some people may refer to their network of friends as contributing to their social capital. Others may think of their coworkers or business associates. Others still may think of their family or extended family. Maybe you're thinking of your neighbors. Social capital can be categorized as who you know. Whereas financial capital is what you have, human capital is what you know, and social capital refers to who you know. What I want to discuss today is the concept of psychological capital, which focuses on who you are as viewed through the four constructs of hope, efficacy, resiliency, and optimism, otherwise known as the hero model. Hope, the first of the constructs, refers to a sense of energy to persevere towards your goals through proactive planning. There are three components that make up hopeful thinking, which I'll discuss shortly. Efficacy is a belief in your own ability to produce positive results and achieve self-defined goals. It's a feeling of self-assuredness, an internal locus of control. Whereas resilience is a positive way of coping even when it seems there are no solutions to negative situations. It's a positive adaptation after a stressful event. And lastly, optimism is a state of being and remaining positive about the likelihood of personal success now and in the future. All of us possess varying degrees of these constructs. The amount we have is determined by many factors, including personal dispositions, upbringing, social interactions, health, and other influences. What I really want to impress upon you is this: the more capital you have, whether it is financial, human, social, or psychological, the better off you will be. In its simplest form, we make deposits and withdrawals from each of our various accounts. As it relates to PsyCap, research has shown the more you have of it, the healthier, more resilient, optimistic, and hopeful you will be. There's also a triggering effect that positively or negatively impacts those around you as it relates to other PsyCap. Now that you know what it is, I'll use a personal case study to illustrate how it impacts human performance and how you can develop each of the four constructs for yourself and others. I intend to provide insights and examples from an epic journey my wife and I took in the summer of 2022. 2 years into my retirement, I started becoming restless, with the routine of retirement and needed a challenge. I always enjoyed hiking, and throughout my career, I would take family vacations to northwestern Maine in the Rangeley Lakes region. One year, when I hiked a section of the Appalachian Trail, I was alone on top of Saddleback Mountain. I remember how freeing it was to be away from everything, particularly the stress of my job. I met a man along the trail who was also hiking alone. Well, he looked much different than I did. I was a clean-cut state trooper, and by contrast, this guy looked like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, only much fitter. He had the long gray beard to his chest and wore ragged clothes and a pack on his back. Well, we spoke briefly, and he shared that he was a through hiker. Well, I didn't know what that was, and he explained. He told me how he had been hiking alone since Springer Mountain, Georgia, and he was nearing the end with just a few hundred miles to go to the top of Mount Katahdin in Maine. I couldn't believe it. 2,200 miles. I remember the moment distinctly as I turned around to walk back to the trailhead and back to the rat race of my job. I glanced back at this man as he walked out of my life just as quick as he walked into it. He didn't have to turn around. He just continued on his journey in the simplicity and freedom of the trail. That moment has remained with me for years and it was on my mind in the summer of 2022 when I had this great idea to through hike the Vermont Long Trail, a 273-mile walk in the woods, beginning at the trailhead in North Adams, Massachusetts, to the Canadian border. I became obsessed with the idea and started planning 2 months prior to the start date of July 17th, 2022. I watched YouTube videos. I researched gear, tested equipment, and totally drove my wife crazy with this epic adventure idea. And get this, she was just crazy enough and decided to join me. I initially thought it was going to be the undoing of our 28-year marriage. It turned out to be one of the best things we've ever done, despite the hardships we encountered. Well, we made lists and we planned our route. We packed and repacked our resupply boxes to be shipped UPS to predetermined pickup points along our journey and set out on July 17th, hoping we would make it to Canada. Which brings me to the first factor in the hero model. Hope is referred to a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. Our hope was to complete the journey. My doctoral research led me to the work of Charles Snyder, an American psychologist who specialized in positive psychology. He was a pioneer in positive psychology, and his theory of hope emphasizes goal-directed thinking, where a person uses both agency thinking, which is the necessary motivation to use those routes, and pathways thinking, the perceived capacity to find routes to desired goals. So what are goals or goal-oriented thinking? Goal-oriented thinkers approach life in a goal-oriented way. And agency refers to believing that you can instigate change and achieve these goals. And lastly, pathways is finding different ways to achieve your goals. When I coach clients to become more hopeful, I refer to it as bridging the gap: goals, agency, and pathways. In other words, making deposit into each of the 3 sub-accounts of hopeful thinking. How did I bridge the gap for my journey? How do you learn to bridge the gap? Well, let's start with goals. When you set goals, they should be SMART. Well, what does SMART mean? S stands for specific. Asking the question, what is it am I going to do? What do I ultimately want to accomplish? And how am I going to do it? The more detail-oriented you are, the more you'll likely achieve the goal. When I defined my goal, I didn't just decide to try a backpacking journey. I was very specific with what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. M, measurable, stands for how will I know that I reached my goal? Well, we define daily and weekly benchmarks using mileage charts and waypoints to track our progress. Attainable, can I see myself achieving this goal? Can I break it into manageable pieces? Again, when we first stepped off on our adventure, it was record July heat in Vermont. Within the first mile, we were swarmed with nagging black flies and mosquitoes. I realized how out of shape I really was within the first 2 hours. I could have easily overwhelmed myself with negative thinking if I thought about the whole 273 miles in that moment. By breaking the day down into smaller components and at times, literally one step at a time, I was able to reframe my goal. It's like trying to lose weight. You'll never lose the 20 extra pounds all at once. You have to do it 1 pound at a time. Relevant. Is the goal too difficult to reach? Is it too easy? Why is it important for me at this time? And as I mentioned before, I was mentally struggling for a challenge in retirement, one that would test my mental, physical, and spiritual resolve. Timely. What is the target date for reaching my goal? I didn't have the time to complete a 2,200-mile journey like the stranger I met atop Saddleback Mountain, but I did feel I could take a month or so during the summer. When I was able to realistically answer each of these inquiries, I was able to craft my goal statement based upon the conclusion of my analysis. I was able to bring an idea into the world by critically thinking about it and, most importantly, writing it down. I got excited and more hopeful that I could actually make it happen. By the way, there's a biological response when you start thinking about achieving worthwhile goals. Setting SMART goals triggers excitatory chemical releases of endorphins within the body. And when you finally achieve those challenging goals, the feel good of achievement is the chemical release of dopamine. That's why it feels good to do good. So some reflections on hope. What goals do you want to achieve? Well, what's holding you back? I challenge you to write them down and turn your ideas into reality and be smart about it. The second component of bridging the gap is agency. Agency is a feeling of self-assuredness, otherwise known as your internal locus of control. A high internal locus of control is a belief that you are in control of the outcomes related to your own life. It is a belief that you can take action to influence outcomes. Let's compare and contrast external versus internal locus of control. A locus of control is a subjective assessment of your situation, whereas external locus of control, you generally believe that things happen to you and you can't change that. Whereas internal locus of control, you generally believe you have the power to change and improve upon your situation. Let me provide an example of internal locus of control. Somebody that goes out and seeks help. If you have a high internal locus of control, you will look for ways to change your situation. One of the ways to do this is to look for a mentor who might be able to guide you through the hurdles. By contrast, if you have a low internal locus of control, you'll likely simply complain about the situation and do nothing to fix it. When I look back and assess my preparation for the Vermont Long Trail, I believe I had a strong internal locus of control on a majority of the areas for planning the trip. I sought out many resources and proactively filled the areas of my confidence and competence that I felt was lacking. The uneasy feeling of the unknown that awaited us served to fuel our desire to be better prepared. I would not allow my ego to inhibit my desire to fulfill my goal. Again, making deposits into the bank account of agency to be more hopeful. Lastly is pathways, P. People who have strong pathway thinking are much more successful at achieving their goals. Pathway thinkers have a contingency planning mindset. They think about plan A, plan B, and fall back to plan C if plan A and B don't work. they find different ways to achieve their goals. And it was General Eisenhower that once said, "Plans are nothing. However, planning is everything," as he prepared the Allies for the D-Day assault at Normandy that would eventually end World War II. When I was in the Connecticut State Police, I like to use the acronym PACE to help me plan better. PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingency, and Emergency. Well, what's primary? Primary is the most effective way to achieve the plan with the resources available. And the alternate is the go-to solution should the primary plan fail. This solution may not be as effective, but allows for completing the task with minimal disturbance to the plan. Contingency is the solution, though not as efficient as the primary or alternate, it should be foolproof. This approach typically lacks complexity and has few moving parts. And lastly, the emergency plan. This is the inefficient 100% solution, even when other aspects of our planning have gone wrong. And along the continuum, the plan goes from complex but easy, starting at the top, to simple but requiring more effort when you get down into the emergency plan. Now, I'm not suggesting that everything you plan requires you to draft a PACE contingency plan. What I can assure you is that if you start thinking more with a contingency planning mindset, you become more hopeful about being able to achieve your goals. So let me give you a pro tip. Be sure to set the pace when planning your goals. And as Nelson Mandela said, remember that hope is a powerful weapon even when all else is lost. The second part of the hero model, as we set off on the trail, we felt very hopeful. But did we have the ability to actually complete the journey? Well, according to Al Bandura, the social psychologist, he said, efficacy is the ability to produce a desired or intended result. And Bandura identified 5 primary ways to increase self-efficacy. The first is an active mastery. When you perform the task in the past, you can do it again. That's experience. That's wisdom. Well, we had backpacked before, but not as far or for as long as this journey was going to take us. The next way is vicarious modeling. You become more confident because you see somebody else do the task. We knew it could be done because there's been so many others before us who've actually completed the long trail. We knew it could be done. Verbal persuasion. You become more confident because someone convinces you that you have the skills necessary to perform the task. Well, one of my mentors who completed the Appalachian Trail several years prior provided me encouragement and said to me, he said, "Eric, you can do it." Imaginal experience, the fourth way of building efficacy, mental imagery. See, I envision what it would feel like to touch the obelisk at the Canadian border and the feeling of satisfaction that would renew my spirit. I put that mental imagery into my head. And lastly is arousal. He said, you can get psyched up, then you perform better. It's the adrenaline rush before the big game. Many people don't realize the significance and power of positive Pygmalions. Just by using the words, you can do it, you can increase performance on average by 15% with nothing else added. That's what the research tells us. You can also help others develop their psychological capital. And when I take a look at organizations and people, and those people and organizations with a strong sense of self-efficacy, they tend to view challenging problems as tasks to be mastered, and they develop a deeper interest in the activities in which they participate. They also form a stronger sense of commitment to their interests and activities, and they recover quickly from setbacks and disappointments. Whereas People with a weak sense of self-efficacy, where they have a deficit, they have a tendency to avoid challenging tasks. They believe that difficult tasks and situations are beyond their capabilities, and they focus on personal failings and negative outcomes, and they quickly lose confidence in their personal abilities. So how do I apply these lessons to the long trail? Let's apply some of the efficacy lessons. There are many experienced people we met during our hike. People have walked thousands of miles and wore out their shoes with the lessons they learned. Well, one such person went by the trail name of Mellon. Considerably younger than me, however, he was working on becoming a triple crowner. A triple crowner is terminology for somebody who has completed all of the 3 major through hikes in the continental United States. They include the Pacific Crest Trail, spanning 2,653 miles along the West Coast and traversing Washington, Oregon, and California. It also includes the Continental Divide Trail, covering 3,028 miles between Mexico and Canada, following the Continental Divide along the Rocky Mountains. And the granddaddy of them all, the Appalachian Trail, though it's not as long as the others, it's the one that's most sought after. 2,194 miles of rocks, roots, and mountains between Springer Mountain, Georgia, and Mount Katahdin, Maine. I was inspired by Mellon's confidence and demeanor. I looked at his pack and it seemed so small, so light. He offered to do a pack shakedown and meticulously went through the contents of my backpack and began to discard all of the unnecessary stuff that was weighing me down. With his help, his coaching, and great example, I lost 10 extra pounds from my pack. And this is Mellon at one of the hiker hostels we stayed at, weighing my pack after he did the shakedown. He explained that people have a tendency to pack their fears. Fear of running out of food, fear of running out of water. I had so much extra stuff that I was carrying, and he was absolutely correct. They were related to my fears. I needed to become fearless, just like Mellon. Mellon encouraged my wife and I to forge ahead and that we both could do this. And once I learned to lighten my load, it made for a much better journey in the days and weeks ahead. So lead by great example, just like Mellon did. He was much more experienced than I, and he took the time to coach and mentor me during the brief time we had together. Let people know that you believe in them. Use the phrase, "You can do this." And in doing so, you will add 15% to their performance outcomes, which might make the difference in helping them achieve their goals. Lastly, learn to become fearless. Take an audit of the things that are weighing you down. Discard them. It'll make for a much better journey. So some reflections on hope. What steps can you take to be better at modeling the way and leading by great example with those around you? Who do you know that could use an extra 15% boost by telling them you can do this? And what extra baggage do you need to discard in order to make for a better journey ahead? And again, I said hope, but it's actually efficacy we were talking about, and I apologize for that. The R in the hero refers to resiliency. We are undoubtedly going to encounter challenges and face hardships. The question is, did we have the grit to endure and overcome? Resiliency is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's toughness. According to Greek mythology, Sisyphus, the king of Ephyra, was punished for his deceitfulness by being forced to roll an immense boulder up a hill, only for it to roll down when it nears the top, and repeating this action for eternity. Well, resilience is a positive adaptation after a stressful or adverse situation. It is one's ability to bounce back from a negative experience with competent functioning. And it's not a rare ability. In reality, it's found in the average individual and can be learned and developed by virtually anyone. And resilience is a process rather than an individual trait that to be had. It is a process of individuation through a structured system with a gradual discovery of personal and unique abilities. There are a number of ways to build resiliency, and I want to talk briefly about two that I found to be most helpful, not only in my professional life, but that were particularly useful on the long trail. Aside from adopting a balanced, holistic wellness lifestyle that embodies the mental, physical, social, and spiritual realms of your life, when I want to provide you with these two additional strategies. One, when stepping off in a new direction, you're better off to take smaller steps than giant leaps. Giant leaps can become overwhelming and harder to recover from if you leap in the wrong direction. When I took my first step on the long trail, it was within the first hour that the record heat in July and the bugs started to weigh on my spirit. If I stayed focused, as I said before, on the entirety of the trip, 273 miles, I would likely have given up within the first day. In fact, many people who start a through hike journey give up very shortly after they start because they become mentally overwhelmed. I started to refocus my journey towards smaller steps moving forward. In fact, there were times on the trail that I literally took a single step and breath in order to progress forward. And I'll explain that shortly. Along with taking small steps, the other strategy I strongly suggest will help build your resiliency is the practice of mindfulness, specifically mindful breathing techniques. Mindfulness has been around for thousands of years, and my doctoral research identified the benefits of this practice in building resiliency, specifically as it relates to stress and trauma. One technique includes the 4-7-8 breathing practice. This practice involves you breathing in deeply for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds, and then exhaling for 8 seconds. As you practice this technique, your intention is to focus on your breathing, specifically counting the 4, 7, and 8. As your mind begins to wander to what happened yesterday or what tomorrow might bring, you simply acknowledge the thought without judgment and refocus back to the anchor of your breathing. I offer that you try this breathing technique for a few minutes. Although it sounds simple, it may not be as easy as one might think to practice. So let me share an experience that might provide some context as to why I find these two strategies useful. About 100 miles into the trail, I experienced a very painful quad strain. And with each step, the pain became worse. We're at least 6 miles from the nearest primitive shelter and had limited cell service. My plan to complete the long trail was dissipating right before my eyes. And with each painful step, I had to ask, would this be the end of my journey? Would I quit? Was it worth it? I started game planning in my head. I did not prepare for any type of injury. I asked myself, well, was I injured or was I just hurt? I decided I was just hurt and that pain was just temporary. I thought about pace. What was going to be my primary and alternate contingency or emergency plan? My primary plan involved continuing to walk forward one step at a time and employ the mindful breathing technique I had learned several years prior. I disregarded the 6 miles playing in my head and refocused on one breath, one moment, and one more step. And hours later, I became a strong believer in not only the small steps approach, but breathing practice as well. We were able to successfully navigate the terrain and take some much needed rest and recovery. If you ever feel like quitting, quit tomorrow. Remember, to take small steps rather than giant leaps. In doing so, it's easier to recover. Another pro tip, practice deliberate and focused breathing techniques. Use the 4-7-8. This stuff really works. Breathing in for 4, holding for 7, and exhaling fully for 8. And if you ever feel like giving up, do it tomorrow. So some reflections. What are the next small steps you need to take to achieve your goals? Can you take a pause and be mindful to experience the moment? And can you take just 3 minutes out of your day and practice 4-7-8 breathing? The last of the hero model is optimism. It is described as the degree to which the individual believes that positive outcomes will occur in the future rather than negative outcomes for themselves and also for others they know, the economy, and the world in general. That comes from Martin Seligman, one of the premier positive psychologists and researchers on optimism. Or in other words of the Navy SEAL, Jocko, just say good. Just say good is a mindset. I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard of this term, but it's very common language in our great military, which is comprised of men and women who have to endure many hardships in the worst of circumstances. In fact, when you look up the term in the military slang dictionary, this is what you will find. To consciously accept or appreciate something that is extremely unpleasant but unavoidable for forward progression. Scarlett has been an exemplary example of somebody who has adopted the growth mindset and seizes the opportunity in life's adversity. I continued to be inspired by her courage and her ability to embrace the suck, even in the worst of circumstances. So some final pro tips on how to build optimism. Inspire an outlook for a better future. Remember that tomorrow is going to be a better day. Stop participating in breeding negativism. People love to attach their negative thoughts to others and have this victim mindset. And they want to attach to you. Be the chemotherapy. Don't let them attach to you. Address the spirit snipers in your organization. Don't let them take over. Don't let them take over the organization. Don't let them take over your life. Let people know what a good job looks like and then reinforce it. And lastly, and quite simply, stop bad and do good. Remember, in order to feel good, you have to do good. There are a couple of worthwhile reads that I think you'll find pretty helpful. Leave it up there for just a second. Maybe you might want to take a photo. It took us 32 days and over 285 miles to complete our long trail journey. There were many excuses we could have used to hop off the trail, but we gently and steadily persisted over time. We tapped into the bank account of our psychological capital, hope, efficacy, resiliency, and optimism, which helped us get to the end. The final lesson I want to share with you is the lesson of the seagull. One day there were 5 seagulls sitting on the dock doing what seagulls always do. One of the seagulls finally decided that it was tired of hanging out with all the other seagulls and decided to fly away from the others and go fishing. I ask you, how many seagulls are left on the dock? Most people would answer 4 seagulls, but I suggest that there's still 5. Just because one seagull finally decides to fly away and go fishing, until it actually flaps its wings and lifts itself off the dock, it's actually still on the dock with all the other seagulls. Well, many of us see ourselves from our own best intentions. I intend to lose weight. I intend to be a better spouse, a better parent, a better teacher. And we see ourselves as if we actually have done the things we intend to go out and do. But we judge others by what they actually get done. The final lesson for today is don't be a seagull sitting on the dock. You have great ideas and goals to accomplish, just like Scarlett does. Go after them and be deliberate in your strategy. You can do this. And if you ever find yourself traveling northbound on Route 148 from Sturbridge, Mass. Into the Brookfields, you'll come upon the Quabog River Bridge. There's a small parking area at the bridge where you can park. This is a beautiful spot with a granite memorial bench that you can sit and reflect and look across the river. A tribute to an educator who, like you, dedicated his life to teaching others. Sit and reflect for a moment. Breathe. Rest easy and know that your hard work will travel to a time and a place you may never see. I want to thank you, Scarlett, for allowing me the opportunity to share some insights with these great people. And I want to thank you, you teachers out there that make such a positive difference in our communities and our children and our grandchildren. You all do a thankless job at times, and you deserve the best that life has to offer. I hope that my time has been added value. And remember, be a hero. Lastly, please don't hesitate to connect with me on LinkedIn by scanning the QR code, or feel free to contact me anytime at the email and phone number provided. I want to thank you again.